Please join me in welcoming Savanna Jensen, Senior Customer Enablement Specialist at AWS and also part of the AWS Optics team, to the show. Savanna, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, John. It's lovely to be here. Good way to kick off the new year.
Actually, that is a very good way. This is my first official recording of the new year. I bet you didn't know that.
Dang. All right. I'm honored.
Yeah, so I have to get my feet back into it, get back into the groove of recording. And in fact, I decided to not take it easy and line up 4 for this week. Why not?
Perfect. Hit the ground running.
Well, I'm going to hit the year running. We're going to get things started right now. So today we're talking about cloud financial management. And is it a once and done thing? I don't know. I think there might be one answer. No, I'm just kidding. So Savanna, before we get started, how about you give the audience a little bit of backstory on yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Savanna Jensen. Right now, I sit within the optics team at AWS, as you mentioned, and I am a senior customer enablement specialist, which basically means I take care of everything that's got a dollar sign attached to it for the customer, whether that's helping them understand their billing tools, helping them understand kind of what they can do to optimize on AWS, or kind of any of the other pieces of the cloud financial management journey. That all falls within my purview. I've been in this role for about 2 years. Before that, I was still at AWS, but I was actually on the concierge team in the enterprise billing support space. So still working with customers on a very similar kind of subject matter, just in a different team, different customer subset, and kind of different focus depending on the day. So been at AWS for about 5 years total, which is...
Wait, did we hit the 5-year mark?
It's not quite yet. I've got, I think, a couple more weeks. I'll have to look, but I did just order my orange badge. If you guys aren't aware, when you hit 5 years, you get the like a different color badge at AWS, which is very exciting. And I just got the like form to fill out to order it yesterday, or work yesterday, Friday. So
well, congratulations.
I'm very excited.
That's a huge milestone. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but 5 years is a huge accomplishment at AWS.
Yeah, I keep on having to introduce myself on calls. People are like, wow, you've been here for a while. I'm like, oh no, I'm not old, or just AWS old. But yeah, so 5 years in the billing space at AWS. Before that, I worked at a startup for a little bit, kind of got to see what it was like working at a space that was still kind of finding their feet and developing their product. And before that, I worked in healthcare tech and was based out of Wisconsin. So kind of a blended development and support role with helping hospitals understand and make use of the software that they purchased. So been in the tech industry my entire career, just kind of different flavors the entire time. And I'm very happy to have wound up here, even though I think there are a lot of different paths to get to Cloud FinOps or Cloud Financial Management. Happy that I ended up taking this one, I guess.
So as part of the AWS Optics team, can you help us understand what does the Optics team do and what are some of your individual roles? I know you're working in the telco thing, but how does that really, kind of elaborate to other customers, or how does that customers really benefit from that?
Totally. So Optics stands for Optimization Intelligence for Cloud Systems, in case that's not something that we'd like put in the show notes or whatever.
Actually, really, you know what? I don't think I'm not sure. I had a conversation with Alex Head. I had a conversation with Steph Gooch. I don't think we ever defined optics. She might have done it during one of the conversations. That's a little nugget I'm going to have to share with everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of not really a hidden acronym, but we've just referred to it as optics so often that I feel like that's just the buzzword now, and that's what everybody refers to us as. So we've kind of not moved away, but it's not super often that you hear the entire name. But yeah, I put it in the chat as well, but Optimization Intelligence for Cloud Systems. And we work with everything optimization related. So helping customers drive their costs down and really make the most out of the AWS resources that they have, optimize their journey on AWS, and make sure they're in a good spot when it comes to paying their bill and understanding what goes into that bill. So Optics works with a subset of AWS customers that are designated as either strategic industries or strategic customers at AWS. And we've got 2 different roles on the team. There's a customer enablement specialist, which is the role that I sit in, and then commercial architects. So if you're familiar with the AWS support model, a commercial architect is a little bit more like a solutions architect. They're kind of a specialist, whereas the customer enablement specialist is more of what we consider like a general practitioner. That's usually the analogy that we use, your GP versus your specialist. So CES, customer enablement specialists, are a lot more boots on the ground, tend to be a little bit more ingrained in the customer's rhythm of business, kind of generally. And then commercial architects will come in for kind of targeted projects, something that's a little bit more technically optimization focused. And again, depending on the customer relationship and the people involved, that can look a little bit different too, but that's generally kind of how we define it. Does that help?
Oh yeah,
make sense
definitely.
a little bit.
So Savanna dropped in the name in the chat, and I'll share everybody the description. Here's what I'm envisioning before I get way off a topic. If you're a Marvel person and you actually go out the acronym of SHIELD and spell and say that all out, I envision you guys had this long name and then you decided to go Optics. And Alex and I actually talked about how Optics, the name came about and how they whiteboarded everything. But that's a huge Marvel reference for those who are listening.
Yep. Yeah, Alex loves to tell the whiteboard story. I'm not sure if she shared some of the other names that were on the table, but next time you talk to her, you should see if you can get a list, because there are definitely some good ones in there.
She did share a couple of those. I'm not sure if she had a picture of it. It was a name right before she went out on leave. We'll have to talk to her about that a little bit. So, Savanna, let's talk about cloud financial management, or even FinOps. And I like how it says cloud financial management, and it's not AWS Cloud Financial. It's really kind of a broad topic and talking about cloud, because no matter how you talk about it, it has to do with the dollar signs tied to a customer's account. Help the audience understand what is cloud financial management, or even the strategy behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of customers find, and a lot of companies as they start moving to the cloud, find that kind of their old concept of finance and kind of the rhythms of business and all the reporting that they used to do has to shift and change a little bit as they move on to the cloud framework, because cloud is very different from provisioning your own servers, as it should be. That's kind of the whole point, right? You get a lot more benefits from the cloud that you didn't get versus on-prem. But in making those moves, you have to adjust your kind of management strategies, the way you think about it, et cetera, et cetera. So with cloud, you get a lot more agility, and you also have the ability to kind of spin things up and spin things down. So kind of an easy to digest example is if you provision a server on an on-prem world, you've paid for it, it's sitting in your data center somewhere. You don't necessarily have to think about kind of how much you're using it, because you've already paid for it and it's sitting in your data center on a rack somewhere. Because you have the flexibility of the cloud, and you can kind of terminate things and use different purchase models, use maybe a savings plan or a reserved instance or spot, depending on what your needs are. There's a lot more configurability, and you have to do a lot more kind of real-time monitoring to make sure that you are spinning things down if you don't need them, because if you leave them up, that impacts your cost, versus in kind of an on-prem world where you've got that fixed cost, right? So cloud financial management is kind of ingesting all of that complexity and developing a strategy for how to manage how you think about cloud, how you think about finances on the cloud, and how you kind of make sure that you're getting the most out of your cloud footprint and engaging with your technical stakeholders in order to either build on to mechanisms that they already have to make them a little bit more cloud optimized, or create new mechanisms to make sure that you're not kind of just hemorrhaging cash out there, or having something sit there that you're not using and not having any cleanup strategies. Does that kind of get to where you're going?
No, okay. So that's a great explanation of cloud financial management and understanding what you're spending and how to utilize the resources. And I'll give you a little example. As I come from a traditional server admin background, we racked, we stacked the servers. We also did the budgeting for an actual physical server, and it was spread out over 5 years. Yep. If you think of a virtual server, you think of an EC2 instance, you have the ability to turn it on, turn it off, and you're only paying when it's on, off, you're saving it, you have the storage, you have to take all those things into account. And I think when people discuss cloud financial management, I think they need to hear it a bunch of times, and it has to resonate with them at one point in time going, we have to change our mindset. We have to change
Yeah,
how we used to think of how the traditional data center is now we don't have a data center. We don't have to worry about it, but we have to be cognizant of what we're spending in that data center.
absolutely. I think it's not necessarily not paying attention to certain things that you used to pay attention to, but it's shifting your mindset to understand that the playground you're playing in is inherently just different, and has different things that should now be kind of on your monthly checklist or on your weekly checklist, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also understanding the tools that you have to investigate those things, because we've got quite a large tooling suite within AWS. There's a lot of things that you can stand up using AWS resources. There's also a very large third-party ecosystem when it comes to monitoring and visualization too. So really getting your feet under you about that, figuring out how to see your costs, what mechanisms work best for you, who to show them to, and the right levels to view that, think about it, and implement it in your rhythm of business. It's a big one.
When we talk about cloud financial management, I'm going to go with CFM
Mhm.
because I keep saying I'll just use the acronym. We'll break some things down. I envision that when you were in a traditional data center, you actually had walls, you had limitations
Mhm.
on what you could and couldn't do, financial constraints, you had physical constraints. But then when you move to the cloud, those walls open up, and now the innovation is pretty much endless. But you have to continuously be aware of what you're utilizing, where you're utilizing it, and how, and make sure that you do the right things around it. What are some guidance that you kind of lead people towards within the cloud environment when it comes to financial management?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about this, both at reInvent and kind of before, but a lot of customers and a lot of the people that we work with, especially folks who are coming into their cloud journey brand new or touching this stuff for the first time, they really want that one right answer. And they ask us, okay, how do we do this right? And there isn't just one right answer, which is both a incredibly true thing and an incredibly frustrating thing for people to hear. But there is a right answer for your business, and that right answer might change as your business changes throughout the year, if there's a seasonality to it, or as you grow, if you're migrating a lot of stuff onto the AWS platform or onto any other cloud platform, that strategy is going to have to evolve with you. But I think realistically, helping yourselves and kind of helping customers think about these questions and get their heads around that ambiguity is a big part of my role and a big part of probably anybody in the CFM space's role, right? And a lot of that needs to come from the root of kind of understanding what it is that your business needs right now, understanding what your priorities are, and taking a really honest inventory of what matters to you and what resources you have and what you can do at the moment. Does that make
So
sense?
yeah,
I'm only
no,
going to ask that like 30 more times. So.
I was actually going to note that and be like, okay, she has a keyword or phrase she used. By the way, I have plenty of those. I actually have a sticky on my desk to make sure I don't use some of these words, because when I go through the recording, I'm like, oh, did I say that word again? Don't worry. You can ask, does that make sense, as many times as you like. It makes sense for me, and I'm hoping it resonates with our audience. Folks, we're talking about cloud management or financial management and a strategy behind it. Now, a strategy is not a prescriptive thing. It's not a here, this is what's going to solve your solution. Savanna's actually talked about it, is that the biggest frustrating part for companies, whether they're startups or enterprises, when they come into it, is they're looking for that one right answer. They're looking to go to AWS and say, hey, listen, here's my issue, here's my problem. Can you give me the playbook on how to solve this? And it actually takes a little bit of digging and go through it, because we don't understand, or they don't understand, what your business need is at the time, or the growth throughout the year, and what you're utilizing. Is it a correct assumption?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the word optimization is kind of interesting too. I like to take that a couple different directions, because there are a lot of things that you can optimize for, right? And one of the most easy to digest classical examples, I would say, of kind of balancing business need or determining what strategy you want to use is thinking about what you actually want to optimize for. If we're thinking about like an RI or savings plan strategy, and those are commitment-based purchase options that you can use to cover EC2, RDS, et cetera, within your accounts. Basically, you make a reservation that tells AWS that you're going to use this thing long term, and we give it to you at a discounted rate because of that commitment to continued utilization. Customers have to really balance a couple different things when they're thinking about this, whether it's picking up every single nickel that they can. That's one way to optimize, but given the kind of different options that you have, the different granularities of these purchase options and these products, if you have a large tech team that is a little bit less sure with what they're going to be using for the next year or 3 years, that's likely going to take a lot of discussion to get them to really zero down and commit to a specific thing. So even if having those 100 hours of conversations gets you to a spot where you are saving more money, it's a large time investment, right? So you can optimize for picking up every dollar, or you can optimize for like easy lift or easy flexibility, lack of kind of having to chase down all of these different groups, and just buy something a little bit more specific or a little bit less specific that still gets you a large discount margin, right? So in that example, you can either optimize for dollars or for time or for kind of a little bit of both, right? You can use a blended strategy. So thinking about whether or not you want to prioritize a certain thing this round is a big one. Maybe you're just migrating onto AWS for the first time. Your tech teams don't really know where all of this is going to shift after you do the lift and shift and then start the optimization process. That's likely one of the times that you should optimize for flexibility. And then when we check in at the end of that term, they're likely going to have a little bit more information about what that's going to look like for the next year and 3 years. And you can start kind of building that strategy towards more specific offerings that get you a higher dollar margin. But there's not one easy button there. And you do have to really take into account everything that's going on in your ecosystem, everything that's going on within your business and kind of where you're at the moment. The other thing that I see folks really get into kind of the analysis paralysis loop on sometimes is like, what should we do this time versus what should we do forever? And thinking about what's in front of you and making the choice that you can make right now with the resources that you have. Maybe you have one cloud financial management person who's also doing 3 different jobs because you're growing so fast that you haven't hired somebody full-time yet. Very, very common situation. Maybe we do the easy thing that's a little bit less of a lift now. And then in a year from now, or in 6 months from now, once you've hired a designated person, or whether you've kind of figured out who's going to have these responsibilities for a longer period of time and going to upskill on that a little bit more, we can take a deeper look and really invest more time into developing a strategy for you that's a little bit more specific. You know?
Savanna, I'm going to come back to the optimization thing, but you touched on this last part of a specific person or come back and evaluate it. There's a lot there to actually talk about,
Yeah.
but I want to center around the person that might be wearing multiple hats, that you only have one person to do this, or you're looking to hire anybody. Is it really the job of one person for financial management or cost optimization or optimizing the environment, or is it everybody's job and awareness, but one person is there to kind of oversee it?
So a little bit more of the latter. Cost conscious culture is absolutely something that I think, and I think anybody else who works in the CFM space would echo me on this. That's critical to making sure that you have the best experience you can on AWS and really kind of making good on all of that optimization, right? If you're a developer and you just log into the console every day and fire up these resources, it's so removed that you don't always realize necessarily that has a price associated with it. If you're spinning up a G4DN to like 24x or whatever, like that's a large instance that does have a high price associated with it. And if that's not something inside your head that you're thinking about, you might not realize kind of the cost impact of that and what that looks like for the business overall. So I think my team specifically, and I think a lot of other folks in the CFM environment and ecosystem dedicate a lot of thought and time to fostering that cost consciousness and encouraging people to evangelize throughout their organization and throughout anyone who works on the cloud in any capacity, that cost consciousness is something that we want to infuse into our daily work, because that just makes a lot of these things a lot easier. And it definitely decreases the amount of cleanup that you have to do. If every time you're spending down an instance, you're like, okay, what else do I have to clean up? Are there AWS snapshots up there that I need to delete? Let's run through that playbook in our head a little bit and make sure that we don't end up with a larger cleanup initiative later. So that's a big one. When it comes to kind of the cost CFM governance, shall we say, we can make up titles for everybody, right? Everybody titles it differently, but kind of cloud finance governance, or cloud governance overall with a finance flavor. The way that looks in terms of butts and seats or people hired can be very different depending on how an organization wants to run it and how that organization thinks about CFM. So we do see people wearing a lot of different hats. Sometimes we see CFM folks sitting under the technical org, sometimes with the finance org, sometimes you've got a team of people working and there's kind of representatives from both sides. Again, I don't think there's any one right answer, and you don't necessarily have to have someone who's hired to just do cloud finance 100%. If that's not what works for your business, it can certainly be a shared responsibility. But that is something to kind of think about and negotiate and likely iterate on as your business grows too.
Change of mindset is really what it takes with regards to CFM and spinning up or utilizing resources within a cloud environment. Now, in any cloud environment, and specifically talking about AWS with their breadth and depth of services, there's a lot at your fingertips that you're able to utilize. One, I think if you come from, if you're not paying the bill, it's very difficult to, kind of keep in your mindset and say, hey, listen, I spun it up. I need to turn it back down.
Yeah.
One of the key things is having that internal evangelist saying, hey, listen, guys, we need to make sure that when we write or build something, we have a reversal of that build to do a cleanup of those resources and an iteration to make sure that things are being removed completely. Or, we need to put in monitoring in place.
Yep. Yeah, I see a lot more of a push for that within probably the last 6 months, even. I'm sorry, the sun is coming out in Seattle for the first time in like a month, apparently, right now. So it's getting my eyes a little bit.
You can always count on Seattle weather to change at the fraction of a second and never plan for it.
To be exactly what you don't want it to be at any time.
It's all good. It works.
Anyway, back to your actual question. Oh shoot, sorry, what was your question?
That's all right.
That's for the blooper reel.
That is going in the blooper reel. So Savanna, I'm going to reiterate my question for you, just because of Seattle weather interrupting your thought process. But speaking of a thought process, is a change of mindset within an internal company to now start removing resources that you don't need or not using and put in the proper monitoring in place or the proper processes. This is not something that's, it's not something that's done overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 2 thoughts on this. One, I've started to see a lot more customers and a lot more like folks that we talk to on a general basis, whether that be like typing questions into the Twitch stream or the people kind of milling about and just asking questions at reInvent. But I've started to see a lot more folks asking for something akin to like a cost optimization checklist when they're first migrating on or spinning up a new workload. And we've got kind of a couple of different flavors of that. I'm sure you can find other ones out there on the blogosphere or within the CFM like AWS blog series as well. But that's certainly something that is coming to the forefront of everybody's mind a little bit more in terms of what are the best practices that we should get in place from the beginning. What are the things that we should be thinking about when we're first moving something on or first spinning something up? And how can we make sure that we're hitting that checklist and checking all those things off? So that's kind of a big one that I've seen a lot more of an appetite for in recent months. And then the second piece, monitoring is a big one. I've seen customers do this in a bunch of different ways. We've got a pretty good tooling suite within AWS for monitoring. There's budgets and kind of all of the different budgets products that are based on a threshold. So there are definitely some pretty creative ways to use those, and kind of different customers use them differently depending on what their desired outcome is, right? At the very minimum, I usually tell people to think of budgets like insurance when you're setting them up. Make sure that you're at least controlling for the worst case scenario. So set one, to make sure that if your savings plan or RI utilization just plummets off a cliff, you get a notification. You don't have to be checking that or thinking about it, and you'll just get that push notification. Similarly, if you've got like a dev account that you want to keep an eye on that you know shouldn't be going above a certain dollar threshold, you can build that in and get a notification that way. The other common one that I've seen people do is regions. If you have like a list of approved regions that you should be using, they'll set a budget alarm to detect any spend outside of those regions as well. So if somebody gets creative and decides to spend something up somewhere outside of like the defined region list that you've got, you'll know about it fairly quickly. We also have a tool called anomaly detection or cost anomaly detection within the Cost Explorer suite of tooling as well, which similar kind of outcome, I guess, but based on ML instead of just a threshold. So you can configure monitors within cost anomaly detection to kind of look at different subsets of your business, whether that's a service level monitor. So tell me if EC2 doubles, or tell me if EC2 spikes, or a subset of accounts, tags, etc. So if you've got kind of different business units or different projects and different account groupings, you can create monitors for each one. And then if you've got a traffic increase or a cost increase on any of them, you'll get a notification about that. And those anomaly detection monitors will kind of keep you in the loop of what's going on.
So everybody, I want to give a quick summary of what we're talking about is cloud financial management strategy, and kind of discussing some of the things with regards to not only your cloud account, but what are the things you can put in place, not only externally, but internally on some of the businesses and processes. One of the things we're talking about right now is some of the tooling available to you. Savanna, the anomaly detection is great and able to work in conjunction not only with your budgets. If you have a budget set of like $1,000, right, and you want to make sure that you have no issues, but you can use the anomaly detection that says, hey, listen, I know I should not reach 1,000, but if for some chance this goes and doubles, it's not going to hit 1,000, but I want anomaly to pick it up that I'm not using those EC2 instances. I've never spin up those, and you can kind of monitor those in place. And I think there was a great add on top of that, and to use some of AWS's ML services integrated into monitoring your accounts.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I always recommend that customers use both if they're going to use one. They both work in tandem very seamlessly, and they monitor for different things. So again, it's kind of just being thoughtful about what you want to monitor. And what situations you want to control for. But with anomaly detection specifically, and I think we've got some resources about this, definitely at least a Twitch episode about this somewhere within the ether. Start by setting up a service level monitor, start looking at what comes out of it, get a feel for how the tool works and how it looks, and then kind of continue to iterate on that. It is ML based, so it will learn with you. A lot of it is going to be predicated off of kind of how much feedback you give it as well. So if you set up a new set of cost anomaly detection monitors and start going in there and say, okay, yes, this is an anomaly, this is a true anomaly, marking that as true or marking something as a false positive, the tool is going to get better as you continue to feed more information into it, and it'll get a lot better at detecting things that you would consider true anomalies. So like many things in cloud financial management, start small, start somewhere, and then keep working with it, keep iterating on it, and you'll get to a place where you're really monitoring and getting a lot of value out of the tool as you kind of move through that process.
Yeah, so the anomaly detection, it learns as you learn how your environment's doing, and it'll start tailoring it and your alerts based off this. So take a little bit of time up front and doing that. Savanna, I want to jump back to the optimization comments that you were going earlier, because it's very interesting that you mentioned it. By the way, one of my keywords is interesting. For some reason, it's just the thing that pops in my head. I got to write a new word down.
It's a lot of interesting stuff out there, John.
It's like the default word. I gotta Very educational, by the way. So I posted, I think it was yesterday, with regards to cloud optimization versus cost optimization. And you were touching on that around just specifics of optimization, not only in your account and saving dollars, but optimizing for like a data center migration or migrating, you can optimize going forward. Is there a balance between cloud optimization and cost optimization when it comes to workloads and applications?
Yes. So easy answer. Yes, there's a balance for that.
All right. Well, that answers it.
I
Thanks.
think
No, I'm just kidding.
I think the example that I can give that makes it most clear, that's like at the tip of my brain, isn't necessarily related to a workload, but is a little bit more related to chargebacks. Is
Nope.
that
Yeah,
something?
go for it.
Okay. So with chargebacks, let's say you have a really complicated business that has a bunch of different business units that all have their own budgets. And for whatever reason, you have a lot of resources that are in a shared service account or several shared service accounts that all of those be user sharing. If you are the cloud financial management person who is responsible for giving every single business unit a broken out bill at the end of the month, you have to find a way to charge that back. If all of these business units are using tags, depending on what those shared services are in the shared services accounts, sometimes that can be fairly easy to map back. Sometimes it's not. Oftentimes, especially if you're just kind of coming to that inflection point where you need a big chargeback strategy, there hasn't been a lot of tagging going on. So you have a couple different choices, right? Within your account structure, maybe it's fairly easy to just give everybody using their own AWS account their own bill, but then you've got to do something with the shared services account. You, as that CFM point of contact or lead who's on the hook for splitting that bill up, can either take a lot of time and a lot of energy sifting through the billing data for that account, assuming that you have no tagging or no other kind of indications at that point, and try to map back exactly who did what for however many hours you want. Honestly, I'm sure you can make that take an entire month's worth of hours if you're at a large enough scale and really want to sort through every single resource and think about like every single thing that was used at a very granular level. That's not necessarily the most effective use of your time. So in like the most simple way to do it, you could also just proportionally split that shared services account cost between every business unit and say, here you go, you all use this account at some point, you've got a piece of the pie. Those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. And there's a wide breadth in between as well, which is usually where we see our customers fall. Some things you can do proportional usage on very easily. You can use consumption data to kind of develop either some sort of script or some sort of chargeback model that will do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. But there are likely some things that you're going to have to end up just blending and doing a proportional split for. So the balance of how granular you want to be versus how much time you want to spend on it and how much time you want to dedicate on other things is kind of what you have to negotiate and figure out there. Because if you are the CFM lead on that account or the CFM lead who's only responsible for cost optimization across that entire business, if you spend 300 hours trying to filter out everything specifically, right, you're probably leaving a lot of other stuff on the table. And maybe it's more worth your time and worth your organization's time if you spend 2 hours on it and just do an easy proportional split and then dedicate the rest of that time to finding optimization opportunities, spinning up better cost governance, helping to make a tagging strategy that will make that easier in the future, right? The opportunity cost and kind of the cost of the time cost really is something that we absolutely need to keep in mind and is something that I think moving to cloud and kind of carving out that cloud financial management motion, it's critical.
So. Do you see many customers really doing chargeback showback to internal departments?
Yes. Again, depends on the customer. I think it's fairly common, especially at a large scale, to have multiple different business units who have different budgets all within the same organization. So a set of linked accounts within that AWS organization. generally speaking, they do want to do some sort of showback chargeback to make sure that everybody A, gets their own bill, depending on how those budgets roll, and at least B, so that they understand what their costs are. You can do that a couple different ways, right? But there's usually some amount of slicing and dicing that needs to happen once you get to a certain organizational structure.
I want to quickly touch on some of the key things that you can do when not only going into the cloud, right? If you have existing resources already deployed in your cloud environment, it's not a huge deal. You can go back and do some of these. Savanna, you touched on them with regards to RIs, savings plans, utilizing spot instances, right sizing, doing some of the key things in general, budgets, ML. I want to quickly touch on the Kerr file. Everybody loves the Kerr file, by the way.
I love the Kerr file.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of people printing it out and running it down their hallway. I'm not a huge
I feel like that is like a milestone in everybody's like cloud, AWS cloud cost career at some point. Alex printed out all the columns at one point. I'm pretty sure I still, when I like moved offices during COVID, I had to clear out all of the paper graveyard of all the things that were just like in my drawers. And I found the Kerr file column printout that I had printed out in 2018 as well. So I feel like everybody does that at some point.
You got to do that at some point to understand what goes into the Kerr file and how to understand all the information that's there and then how to filter it. But
to look at it and go, oh no, and then go back to SQL and try to parse it out that way.
Hey, that's a good idea. AWS has some internal tooling that you can utilize. You have the Cost Explorer. You can visualize some things. You can break down some of your usage back and forth. The Kerr is definitely something that you should set up. I mean, immediately when you create an account, get that going. And definitely, what is it? The Parquet format. That's really crucial to, is it Parquet?
Parquet, resource IDs. Right. You always want to enable those resource IDs. That's my biggest Kerr recommendation, because that's going to give you the kind of most granularity possible. And in my opinion and in my experience, usually if you're going to the Kerr, you need something deeper than what you can get in Cost Explorer or get in our other billing artifacts. And most of the time, that's going to be a resource ID. So the Kerr can help you answer questions like which S3 bucket is costing me the most, because that S3 bucket name is a resource ID. If you don't have resource IDs turned on in your Kerr, you can get close, but you're never going to be able to point to exactly what the resource is that's doing the thing. So making sure that you click that resource IDs checkbox when you're setting up your Kerr is really critical.
And it will help you also filter down that resource ID and the cost and everything associated with it. So Savanna, real quick, one of the key things that I always see on social media is talking about their cloud bill, and everybody's always like sticker shock and, oh my God, I can't believe I'm spending so much on it. There's two things I think when I see this. One is education and skill sets around their cost and the utilization, that it's not a once and done type thing, and to continuously monitor. This is not something you do on a Friday and then come back in 6 months and say, oh, we got to do it again. Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to talk about is that when you go to the cloud, you're using new resources, new services that you were never achievable or weren't achievable in the time frame that you wanted. So you would request this and 6 months later you'd get it. Now you can actually log in and 5 minutes later have exactly what you're looking for. You're able to innovate faster. And excuse me, got a cough for some reason. Oh. Yes, I'm leaving that in there because that's what happened. But really talking about the innovation of the cloud, and it allows you to not only move more over there, you might actually have, say all your applications from your data center moved over, but now you're able to do more and innovate more. So yeah, your costs will go up, but you're also doing so much more in the cloud. What's your feelings on this?
Yeah, so I think one of the largest business propositions of the cloud and one of the largest benefits is that ability to innovate and experiment, right? We have a lot of, I think the big one right now that I keep hearing about is AI ML services, and you can play around with SageMaker. You can experiment and try things out really easily within your AWS account without a lot of commitment. If it doesn't end up working for you, you could spin it down, not use it anymore, right? If you need to think of or kind of shift what service mix you use, you can play with that too. Whereas in a data center environment, you're kind of locked in. Once you buy something,
Yep.
provision it, it's on that 5-year amortization schedule, and you've got it whether or not you're using it, right? So experimentation is a lot higher risk because of that sunk cost. Whereas on the cloud, it is a lot easier to try things out, do a POC, see if it works for you, and kind of go from there. It's also exciting to developers often, the people who are physically doing this experimentation, because they have so much freedom and so many kind of new things to try. So that is kind of a soft benefit, is the exciting piece of it, keeping your workforce engaged and making sure that the people who are hands-on keyboard have those tools in their toolkit and have the ability to play around, experiment, and also build their skill sets is a big one too. Going back to that iterative piece, as you mentioned, it's not something that you just all set up and you're good to go. There aren't a lot of absolutes that we deal with. We do have a couple, and even those are fairly, I guess, flexible. I always encourage customers to have a way to view their costs, whether that is custom usage report, some kind of dashboard that they've built themselves, Cost Explorer, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure that you have a way or a place to go to see your costs. If I'm on the phone with somebody and I say, okay, let's go look at XYZ service, or let's see how much this is costing you, I want them to have a way to go do that. Because if you can't see it, you can't fix it, and you don't know what's out there. And if the only thing that you're getting is just that emailed invoice at the end of the month with a total on the top, you're really not seeing the whole picture. And you're probably going to get sticker shock at some point, because that one-up number that you get at the end of the month is not necessarily as useful as looking at it day by day or week by week and taking kind of a more granular slice and dice into what's sitting in your AWS environment, right?
I think cloud financial management has created a new role or awareness within companies. And they kind of more of like a FinOps type role, where they're being aware of what they're spending within their environments on a day-by-day basis, because it's no longer a set number over 5 years, 2 to 5 years. The number will fluctuate and it's hard to plan. And I think that's one of the things that frustrates older companies or enterprises, is that they're used to planning out years in advance, when cloud first companies understand the fluctuation, and they realize that some of the benefits and costs come in it, and they design appropriately for it.
Yeah, I think what your business product is can really influence that a lot too. Yep. Not necessarily just cloud first versus kind of coming from an on-prem mindset, but there are some companies and some businesses where your product is very seasonal, right? If you're a game studio and you have a AAA title launch, that's going to be a massive spike when it launches. And because even if you are coming from an on-prem world, you're used to that fluctuation and kind of what that looks like. It's a lot easier for folks to wrap their brain around elasticity as a concept. Whereas if you have a business that's a little bit more steady state, or just providing a same service every day and usually doesn't get a lot of traffic variation, maybe gets a little bit, but not like a big seasonality spike or a big change depending on the day or the event or whatever is going on at the moment. Those businesses, it usually takes a little bit longer for them to digest it and kind of think about the cloud benefits and chew on that, and then pivot their strategy appropriately. So
Savanna, we'll be wrapping things up here in another minute or two. I have 2 questions for you. One is, after listening to this talk, my audience is curious on how they can get started in creating, their cloud financial management strategy. What are some recommendations or approach that you might provide to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, take a deep breath. You don't have to do everything all at once. And it's probably not going to be useful if you try to do everything all at once. There are a ton of good resources out there to help you kind of mill through what's available, either within AWS or something that you can build yourself, right? To get your feet under you and understand what tools are out there. Do a little bit of research, play around in your account, get into Cost Explorer, get into those tools that kind of come standard, get the CUR set up, see what is available, and understand what you have right now. Then start thinking about what questions you want to answer, what matters most to your business at the moment, and use those insights to build a strategy that you can then iterate on. We've got a framework of dashboards called the Cloud Intelligence Dashboard Framework that is available within the well-architected labs. If you can want to do an easy deploy or a quick deploy and get those out there. Going through the cost optimization pillar of the well-architected lab framework is really great because it walks you through how to do a lot of things in Cost Explorer. Even if you don't do all of the exercises, just reading through and kind of seeing what tools you have available and seeing what levers you have to press will certainly be helpful for you. And I guess just don't feel like you have to do everything. Pick one thing to start with and work on that. Reevaluate in a week, a month, a quarter, whatever makes the most sense to your business, and continue to iterate. That goes for optimization as well. If you're trying to optimize every service at once, that's likely going to be pretty overwhelming for you. It's also going to be pretty overwhelming for your tech teams if you just send out one email that says optimize everything that you have in your AWS account. They're not going to know what to do with that.
Send that on Friday, and by end of day Friday, you need this done.
But if you target it a little bit more and say, okay, let's think about EC2 right now, or here are a tangible list of steps to take to check this certain thing first. That's something that's a little bit more actionable. It's small enough that people don't feel overwhelmed. And those little things added up over time are really what's going to move the needle for you.
I think the first thing that you provided was take a deep breath. You can't do it all at once. Like, it's going to be okay. I think that's really key for folks coming into their environment, whether they've seen it, they're doing it, they're trying to create it, whatever it is, they're at the first step or the last step in between, just realizing that it just takes time and iteration, and it's never done.
Yeah, it's never done. And you're probably going to get curveballs along the way. Just like in life, we all get curveballs along the way. I was so ready to hit the ground running last Tuesday and just do everything and just be on my game for 2023. And I then got a new laptop and had to spend the week in and out of IT trying to set it up. And that, like, I could have let that just throw me off for the rest of the month or the rest of the year. But you kind of just have to work with what you got, pivot and go for it and do the best you can with what you have at the time. So
just go with it. New laptop. I got to get one soon, and I'm not looking forward to it. We all know those horror stories and things you got to go through to reinstall, setup, and you can't remember what you installed before or what configuration you made.
Every day I find a new thing that I'm like, oh, no, I have to reinstall this too, don't I?
Well, is living learning. So Savanna, I want to give folks a little bit more information on how to reach out to you or where to find more. So, and you also do keys to optimization on YouTube. You want to share any information, whether they can like, follow, subscribe, whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that following the keys to optimization on either YouTube or Twitch is likely the easiest way to get in contact with us and get started there. We do have an email address, which stuff is going to kill me for not having at my fingertips. But we say it every show, and I can probably grab it and get it to you before this publishes.
It will be down in the description below. Don't worry. We'll save you from getting yelled at.
Perfect. But there is a email address through the Keys to Optimization Twitch show that you guys can reach out to if you do have specific questions. We are on a little season break right now, but usually it is every Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. British time. If I'm remembering correctly and doing that math right. And we run every week. Please feel free to drop in, post a question in the chat, interact with us that way. Happy to answer questions as they come in, and got a pretty exciting topic slate. I was going to say title slate. It's not really a title slate. It's just topics. Topic slate for the beginning of 2023.
Awesome. Thank you, Savanna. So Savanna, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It was lovely. I'll
All
be
right, I'm glad
here.
you enjoyed yourself. It was a very interesting topic, and we didn't get to everything around cloud financial management and strategy, including the well-architected framework on cost optimization. But don't worry, there's always more information and more podcasts on the way. Everybody, Savanna Jensen, Senior Customer Enablement Specialist at AWS and part of the AWS Optics team. Savanna, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, my name's John Myer. Thank you for watching the John Myer podcast. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, because guess what, folks? We're out of here.